Forum Communications Company is proud to be a part of the Trust Project. Learn more at thetrustproject.org. Hey folks, before we get started, I just wanted to tell you, you can unlock unlimited access to political news, commentary, opinion, and a whole lot more at inforum.news/port for only 99 cents a month for your first 3 months. Hurry, get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now. This podcast is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Well, happy Monday to you. It's the Monday before primary day, so we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow and Tuesday. It's a very consequential primary season for our state legislature. There's a number of I think very important primary races around the state, and I mean I'm not describing this as a good thing per se, but in North Dakota, just the way it is right now, these primaries may as well be the general election, because in a lot of cases, there's just literally no other candidates other than the Republican candidates. There are no Democratic candidates. And in some of them, even where there are Democratic candidates, let's face it, they're probably just not going to be very competitive. So in a lot of the state, we have, the election is really tomorrow. That's going to decide who's going to sit in the legislature and represent some of these seats. And there are some even among the Republicans, some very divergent views on what constitutes the right sort of public service for the state of North Dakota right now. And so that's going to be an interesting question, what's going to happen with the Postia caucus. But then also in Fargo, we have, I shouldn't say just in Fargo, we have consequential local races across the state. My hometown in Minot, we have a 3-way mayoral race. In Grand Forks, there's 400 people running for the school board or something. Maybe not 400, but there's a lot. It's all over the place. Fargo, obviously North Dakota's largest community. It's featuring someone who is not just a servant in the state legislature, but also someone who is seeking to run for mayor in what has become at times a pretty heated race. Shannon Roers Jones, Representative Shannon Roers Jones. How are you?
I'm doing well, Rob. How are you this morning?
Very good. I wanted to ask you, because you ran, I know you considered, mayor's something I want, and you considered it, and you waited, and then, you launched your campaign, and now you are at the end of it. And I think the question I wanted to ask you is, what about this campaign surprised you? Because I think everybody goes, like, I know for me, as somebody, not as a candidate, but as somebody who writes about this stuff, I go in thinking that an election cycle is going to be about a certain thing or a certain issue, and like 80% of the time I'm wrong, because something else comes up and it just out of nowhere, and it surprises me. So was that like that for you with this race?
I would say this was a very surprising race and a very different race compared to my legislative races. I think the things that surprised me was that the things that I was hit on were not issue related at all. It wasn't about anything related to my past voting record, my ideology, any of those sorts of things. The things that I was hit on were related to potential conflicts and my relationship in my family business. And that my conflicts were so much greater than the conflicts of the other candidates who were running for the office. And then also, I was very surprised by the media coverage of this, and how I don't know if the word is biased or certainly media coverage that's favorable to one candidate and very unfavorable to me. Even when we had some positive news that we tried to share by way of the building permit that we pulled, the local newspaper chose not to run that story, and yet they ran every other story that indicated that there was a problem with my family business or that there was a problem with me running for this office.
There's a lot there to unpack. Let's start with obviously a lot of this race has been about conflicts of interest. And that's always an interesting argument, because in North Dakota, we like our public officials to be part-timers. So this is something, and that I think that's what most North Dakotans want. They want they don't want a full-time legislature. They don't necessarily want full-time mayors or full-time city council members. And in fact, obviously most of our communities, that would be unnecessary. I don't know what they would do with their time all day in some of these communities. But that's what the voters want. But I mean, that means that the people who hold these offices have day jobs, and who has a day job that doesn't intersect with the government at some point. So a lot of your race has focused on, obviously you work for your family business, which is a real property development, construction, and you build things. And that's obviously very intertwined with city government, with zoning and property taxes and all the other things that city government does. And so the argument there was, and I see it a lot, is the criticism of you is essentially this is Roers Construction. This is how I saw somebody put it, I think on Reddit. It was Roers Construction putting their personal counsel in as mayor. That seems to be the knock on you. Now you're saying the other people who are running, obviously incumbent Mayor Mahoney, Arlette Preston, you're saying that they have conflicts too. Delve into that, because we've talked a lot about your conflicts. What are theirs?
So, I can't speak to all of them. I think some of them have to do with investments that they have in projects that are being developed. I know that on that May 2nd meeting, the one where Dave Pepcorn really went ballistic and attacked Jim Roers, minutes after he had that tirade against Jim Roers, he had to recuse himself from the very next vote because he has some property in downtown Fargo that has been a beneficiary of TIF funds and was being sold or incorporated in a project downtown. So, and every one of the candidates that is currently on the commission or is mayor has had conflicts in the past that they have had to recuse themselves from. So I would say, just in full disclosure, from the very beginning, I have said that I would recuse myself from any vote that impacts myself or my family's businesses. And what that does is it actually makes it a higher bar for Roers to get things passed through the city commission. So in the future, if we were to have some property that we wanted to have replatted, if we were to have some project that we wanted to apply for TIF funds, that would actually, normally you have to have 3 of 5 commissioners vote on it.
They have to get 3 out of 4.
You'd have to have 3 out of 4. So it makes it more difficult for Roers, not less difficult. But to go back to your statement a minute ago about how we're so intertwined in the city, that's one of the stories I think that the local media and maybe candidates have been trying to sell. And I would disagree with that wholeheartedly. In the last 46 years where Roers has been in business in the city of Fargo, we have had 4 projects come in front of the city for TIF financing. And that, over even just the last 20 years, it's been about once every 5 years or so that we've had a project come in front of the city for TIF funds. And so, when you think about that in context of an election cycle, that's maybe once every election cycle or 2. It's not so intertwined. And other things that we have come in front of the city, whether we're requesting building permits, would be pretty often, but that's not something that the city commission deals with. We have done some projects on behalf of the city, but those all go through a public bid opening where you submit your bid in a sealed envelope. Everyone submits their bid in a sealed envelope and they're open publicly. So there's really no way to manipulate that process either. So I think, certain people have been doing their best to try and make it sound like I would really have my thumb on the scale with all of these things coming forward. But anything that comes in front of the city commission where the commission would vote, I would not vote. So that increases the burden for Roers. And everything else is already going through an alternate process.
One of the things, because my philosophy about this stuff is I don't want to restrict, right? I don't want to restrict who voters can vote for or who they can support with their money. My position is always disclose, right? It's always transparency. Right. So, my problem is not, well, so-and-so works for a company that, has to get building permits and stuff from this government. My thing is, as long as we can all see, and so that was the thing I never understood is, there's nothing that you could do as mayor with respect to your family's company that wouldn't be a part of the public record, right? That people can look and see she voted this way, or she took this action, or she did this or that or the other thing. That's all part of the public record. And voters could look at that and decide, I think she's being too friendly. I don't think she's being friendly. They can make up their own minds about how they feel about that stuff. So I never understood that. How much of this do you think is driven by the fact that you already hold a partisan office, right? A lot of people view, and I'm not one of these. I don't know. Like I feel like nonpartisan local races, I don't know that that's as important as some people. That's a debate for a whole other podcast. Mayor of Fargo is ostensibly a nonpartisan office, although I think it's not that hard to look at the candidates and understand everybody has an ideology. But you already hold an office for which you're Republican. You're nominated, elected as a Republican. How much of the reaction to you running for mayor do you think is a reaction to the fact that you're already a quote unquote partisan politician?
I'm sure it's related. You know, nobody's saying that in the media, and nobody's saying that publicly. But I think, you know, there has to be something tied to the fact that they view me as a more conservative person, or someone who's a Republican, and Fargo is a much more moderate community. But if you look at my voting record in the legislature, I vote more conservative on certain issues. I vote less conservative on other issues, because I don't approach my voting with an ideological hat. You know, I'm not interested in making sure that I get on all of the what are the
ratings?
The ratings.
People are obsessed about. My
conservative union rating is maybe not the best in the state legislature. It's actually far from it. But I'm less concerned about the ratings and more concerned about the implications of what we're voting on and how that's going to impact people, especially people in Fargo. You know, and so I vote differently as a Fargo legislator than probably a lot of my colleagues in the western part of the state would, or they would like me to. And that's because I don't represent Bismarck or Dickinson. I represent Fargo.
The Indy GOP is a big tent party, and there's probably people that see a problem with that. I don't necessarily. I think there's a lot of ways to be a conservative, and I don't think there's anything wrong with having a philosophy. Not that you were saying that there's nothing wrong with having a governing philosophy, but I mean that approach where it's service first, right? You know, you should be, as a public servant, more worried about, you know, making sure the trash service is adequate and the roads get plowed than you are about servicing some notion about what it means to be a conservative. Serve your communities first. That to me is the most important thing. And you have no response. You're like, yes, you're Rob. I absolutely 100% agree with that. Sure. I didn't ask you a question. I did a little speech and then expected you, I guess, just to respond to that.
Yeah, but no, I mean, related to what you're saying, everyone on the commission, everyone running for office has their own personal ideology. Frequently, they line up with a political persuasion. You know, I know that the two mayoral candidates who are currently elected, Mahoney and Preston, both line up on the Democrat side of things. They fundraise through Act Blue. They take advantage of Democrat conventions and those sorts of things. But, you know, does that mean that they're more or less qualified? I wouldn't say so. I think it's just a matter of your ability to work with people on both sides of the aisle, which I think my history in the legislature has shown that I will work with people on both sides of the aisle. I have very good colleagues on the Democrat side, with working in the past with Carla Rose Hansen. She and I served on the Judiciary Committee before, making sure that when we try and pull our legislators together from Cass County to make sure that we're educated on issues that affect Fargo and our region, that I'm not inviting only Republicans, I'm inviting the Republicans and the Democrats, because it's important that we work collaboratively to advance the issues that impact Fargo and Cass County, like the FM diversion. You know, we work very hard to get our legislators educated on the impacts, the importance of this project for our region, to make sure that we could work together to get it funded in the legislature. That was an uphill battle, but because we had everybody working on the same page, I think we were able to get that done.
A centerpiece of I want to say the campaign against you was you've referenced it already, where your father, as the head of the company, had gone to the city commission for what on the agendas just looked like a routine a routine matter related to a TIF district, and surprise, surprise, delays in the construction business, because that never happens, right? Due to weather and economic circumstances or whatever the factor is. And
Right.
I think it's fair to describe it got ambushed by people with political motivations, where you have two members of the city commission are running, or your opponents running for mayor, and a third one, I guess, has his own political agenda, but he got mugged in a lot of ways, and I thought it was really, because you referenced this, and I did think it was really unfortunate for the amount of time that was spent talking about the idea, and I should explain for the audience if you weren't following this. It had to do with a TIF district. Part of the project had some townhomes that were to be built, that are to be built. The insinuation made by Pepcorn and other critics of yours was that there was going to be an effort to not build, the cash in on the TIF money without building the townhomes, and that the townhomes, which were part of the compromise that allowed this development to go forward, weren't going to get built. So much ink was spilt on that, and then, you guys just applied. I got the press release. You guys just applied for the permits to build the townhome, and I'm still looking in the public record for any indication anywhere that these townhomes weren't going to be built, and that to me was very frustrating. That it seemed like that story was told in a very one-sided way. Like voters weren't getting the whole story there.
I appreciate your commentary on this, because it was very frustrating to me as well that we were already working with the city. Jim Roers had been working with Jim Gilmore at the city to figure out the plan, the process for renegotiating the developer's agreement to make sure that the townhomes would get built. We have never said that we were not planning on building the townhomes. We just needed more time. And a lot of people have said, well, why didn't he build the townhomes first, and different things like that, kind of second guessing Jim's intentions. Well, if he was going to build the townhomes, he should have built them first. That was because the land where the townhomes are going to go was used for staging all of the construction materials. And so Jim said during his presentation that the site was very congested. He said the delays were due to congestion. And I think a lot of people took that to mean traffic, but it was about the site and how we were going to build around the entirety of the block and stage materials so that we could continue to build in an orderly fashion. And so because of delays on the apartments, delays on the church, everything continued to be on the land where the townhomes were going to go. That being said, the process at the meeting at the city commission was very, very frustrating for me, because it was so obvious that these personal attacks that they made on Jim Roers, where Dave Pepcorn called him a liar and said his credibility was zero, and that if the sky was, if you told me the sky was blue and the grass was green, I wouldn't believe you. All of these personal attacks on Jim, only to turn around and try and rope me into this when I have literally never been involved in this project. And they tried to make it, he took and made assumptions about what I would do if I were mayor, and all basically to cast aspersions on me, to bring me down in my political race. But in the process, they spent, however many 20, 30 minutes of the commission meeting destroying Jim and his reputation in the community, where he has done nothing but improve the community over the last 46 years. So, and then the media coverage of it all over the, since May 2nd, so we're a little over a month, probably 5 weeks now. The Forum has chosen to publish only negative articles and only negative letters, when I know people have sent in positive letters, and I submitted that positive press release about the fact that we've pulled the building permit, we're moving towards that construction, and they've chosen not to publish any of those things. And that is the part that has been both the most surprising and most frustrating throughout this. You want to believe that the media is unbiased, but I'm having a hard time believing it right now.
I should tell. I mean, that's the company I work for. I don't have anything to do
Right,
with
right,
with that.
I
That,
know
I mean,
this
and
is
I mean,
also
you're the candidate. You're making claims. I'm not involved in that process at all.
right.
I don't know. I'm sure they have some things to say about their editorial process. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I will say, in terms of Commissioner Pepcorn's claims, to me, when you make an extraordinary claim, it requires extraordinary evidence. So if you're going to accuse somebody who's coming before the city commission like that, and you're going to accuse them of being just a habitual liar, then prove it, right? I mean, where is the evidence that Roers came in and in the past on other projects or in other situations had tried to get one over on the city, or has made agreements to do things and then reneged? If there's a pattern of that sort of behavior, okay, well then maybe a scolding like that is merited. If there's a pattern of that behavior, but I'm looking, where is the pattern of that behavior? Where is the justification for this, except for the political justification, which is that, they saw a mayoral candidate that needed to be taken out. And the thing and I'm not a citizen of Fargo, so again, maybe I don't have a dog in this fight, but I'll tell you, if that was my city government, I would be very concerned about the perception that leads to other people who are doing business with the city, who might think, gosh, if my politics in some way runs contrary to the people on the city commission, they're gonna ambush me in some ways.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want that. I mean, North Dakota in general, right? What do we have? North Dakota's open for business, right? That's Fargo too. North Dakota, the state of North Dakota, our communities, we're open for business. You come here, you're going to get a fair shake. Fargo, with that situation, really undermined that reputation. It was so disappointing to see.
And I would say there's a couple elements of that I think really will have a chilling effect on people's interest in doing business in Fargo, or even people's interest in living in Fargo. There's the fact that Dave Pepcorn, in his diatribe, said, this is how developers act. Developers are all the same, right? He paints everyone with the broad brush, basically saying all the developers are liars and cheaters. There's the other part of that is the fact that Mayor Mahoney never stepped in and said, this line of comments is out of line. It's, you need to tone it down. He never used his gavel. He never admonished Dave Pepcorn to be more civil, and he hasn't in the past. Dave Pepcorn has gone after other citizens appearing in front of the city commission with his sit down comments that he made during the authentic housing testimony or hearing. I guess it's not a hearing in the city commission, but people speaking in front of the city commission. And so what we have here is just now a pattern of city commissioners sitting up there on their dais and assaulting the citizens who want to appear in front of them. And so how is that going to benefit the city when citizens don't feel comfortable? I mean, for the average citizen, appearing in front of the commission and trying to speak about something that is important to you, speak about something that is concerning to you, is intimidating enough. But if you think that you're going to go up there and get assaulted verbally by our city commission members, you're just not going to go. And that doesn't benefit the community either. That's
something I know that Mayor Mahoney specifically, maybe he's acknowledged that there's a civility problem. And I think some of the past clashing between Commissioner Garrick, who's not running for re-election, and Commissioner Pepcorn, flipped him off. And I mean, he's acknowledged that there's a civility problem, right? And it's not just, holding hands and saying kumbaya. I get it. People are passionate about this stuff and you throw sharp elbows sometimes. It's about controlling yourself in public and having a process that people aren't intimidated away from participating in. And so to speak to that, like if you were mayor, right? Because that was something Mayor Mahoney said, is that, in the future, we need to have a talk. They've talked, like, how do we bring civility back into the city commission? So let me ask you that question. If you're mayor, how do you bring civility back into that process?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think the very first thing you do is you start with a conversation about what is acceptable and what is not acceptable, right? When we begin every session in the legislature, we have, there's kind of a metric on how you address and how you handle people who appear in front of a committee. Citizens who are appearing on their own behalf are handled with kid gloves, right? You do not interrogate them. You do not speak poorly, aggressively to them. These are people who are here. They're generally never done this before, scared to death, and you need to treat them carefully. Versus lobbyists, versus people who appear on behalf of state agents.
You can be a little bit more, they're professionals, so you can.
Is their job.
Right.
You know, you can ask them the tougher questions because they should be prepared for the tougher questions. And so I think certainly you need to lay out that framework and say, citizens need to be treated with the utmost respect. You know, and just talking about, since I have brought up more of this conversation about the need to treat our voting public civilly and really one another as commissioners civilly, respectfully, Mayor Mahoney has started to talk about, yes, we need to do this, but he's also said, we'll look at this in July. Like, it doesn't matter right now. We'll just, we're not going to worry about civility pre-election.
Well, right now they're teeing off on you, so that serves his interests.
Right. We'll worry about all of that civility stuff post-election. And my guess is if Mayor Mahoney were to win re-election, it would all be yesterday's news.
Right. And also, because whenever we talk about civility, again, I get it. We're all passionate about this stuff. I am a polemicist by trade, right? So I understand the value of that sometimes. Right. But there's a difference between that, between being a passionate and vigorous advocate for your point of view versus just name calling and flipping people off. Like there's a distinction between these two things. One is fine and the other is not.
You attack the issue, not the person, right? If you disagree with someone about their position or their approach to something, then you disagree about the position or the approach. But to go after a person and say, you are a liar, you are a dishonest person, you are trying to cheat or steal from the city with no proof, like you've said, nothing to substantiate any of that, that's inappropriate.
A lot of the other issue that's come up is obviously if you were elected mayor, you would be elected both a lawmaker and mayor. And people saying, I think that what's your position? I mean, people have made that like you shouldn't have both. That you should resign from the legislature if you're going to be mayor of Fargo. How do you respond to people who are concerned about that?
Well, first of all, both of them at this point are part-time jobs. Now, I know Mayor Mahoney has said that Fargo deserves a full-time mayor, and that's a very convenient talking point now that he's decided to retire and he has someone running against him who has other responsibilities. But that's something that Fargo has always had, a part-time mayor's position. And if we're going to switch to a full-time mayor's position, that's something to be decided on by the citizens of the city of Fargo, not the mayor. For the mayor to dictate that this should be a full-time position is self-serving. The citizens of the city of Fargo have to fund that position, and so they should be voting on whether or not that position should be full-time or part-time, because like you said earlier, the citizens of North Dakota generally appreciate the fact that we have people who serve us in an elected capacity, but they also have lives outside of their elected capacity, and that brings them a greater perspective and kind of skills to draw from in that role.
I appreciate what you're saying, but let me push back a little bit, because mayor's a part-time job, legislature's a part-time job. You put those together, that sure sounds like a full-time job. Plus, you have to have a day job on top of that. So, for instance, when you're in every 2 years, the legislature meets for 4 months roughly. Right. How do you attend to the duties of mayor in Fargo while you're in Bismarck, attending to your duties as an elected member of the State House of Representatives?
Rob, it's all about prioritization. And certainly during that time, I imagine I would do very little at Roers. And that's kind of been the case as it is right now. But I think there is a way to balance it. And what I want to do is spend, if I'm elected as mayor, then I can spend those first couple of months getting my feet on the ground as the mayor and evaluating whether or not this is something that could be done on both levels. So I have made no decisions thus far, but I have a period of months to determine if I think it's possible to do both jobs. Everything else after that is prioritization. Now, fortunately, we have fantastic technological advances that have come around since COVID. So I think that there's
some rule changes in the legislature where people can return.
Some rule changes in the legislature. So I do think I've already said to my legislative leadership that if I were to come back to the legislature after being elected to the mayor's position, I do not want a chairmanship or something like that that's going to require a lot of my time. But I do think that there is the possibility for me to do remote participation in the legislature by a committee, those sorts of things. I would make sure that I was always present in Fargo for commission meetings. And I think that there are things that I can do for Fargo from Bismarck and for my legislative role from Fargo. It's not a done deal. I'm just starting to think about things logistically and say, if I'm elected, is it a possibility? And if it is a possibility, I do think that there are very distinct benefits for the citizens of the city of Fargo. If I didn't think so, I wouldn't even consider it. But that being said, I'm not elected mayor yet. I hope that I will be by the end of tomorrow. That's really, it's all in the hands of the citizens of Fargo.
Shannon, I asked for 30 minutes. You gave me 30 minutes, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the time, Rob.
Want more political news like this? Visit inforum.news/port to get 3 months of unlimited access to our news network for only 99 cents a month. Don't wait. Get this limited time offer at inforum.news/port now.